Hey, what's up and welcome everyone to another Warzone Academy video. In today's video, we're going to be going over the nitty-gritty details, all of my graphic settings, my controller settings, my keyboard and mouse settings, everything that I use to help spot my enemies easier, to run my game at max performance, and then just to help me get the overall win. So I've gotten all of these settings through perusing all of the forums, all the YouTube videos, taking the graphic settings of my favorite streamers, trying them out myself, and I'm not going to bore you with the individual, oh, I got +5 frames from this, -3 frames from that. There are videos out there that do that. I'm just going to run through this fast and dirty as fast as I possibly can. Go through it with me, match your settings, and I hope this video helps you all out. Let me know down in the comments what Warzone Academy you want to be seeing next. I have seen your comments, and in the future, I'm going to be changing up my thumbnails from the chalkboard full-up gameplay or full-up, guide like I am right now, and then other ones where I'm providing gameplay and setting the stage, still providing value, but it's more gameplay than it is guide, so keep an eye out for that change. But without further ado, let's get right into it. We'll start off with general. Field of view, I use 110 FOV. This gets me a wide enough field of view, but most importantly, go into advanced and set independent. This gives me the wide field of view, so when I'm running around, I can see everything that's going on. But then when I want to actually zoom in, it's independent of what my wider FOV is. The second I ADS, everything scopes in so I can see, my target extremely clearly. It zooms in really far on them. If you're playing with a wider FOV, I would really suggest playing independent. Brightness I have turned up a bit. Most people play with the default 50/50, but when you're playing in places like Superstore or, playing in, dark attics of buildings, you can actually spot enemies easier than you otherwise would have. There are very few times where I feel like the game is washed out from this higher brightness settings. I keep these all standard. I enable skip introduction movie because I want to get into the game. This one I talked about in my high kill strats. You have to be playing with square. I believe it's an additional 20% of the map that you're missing out just by rounding off those corners, and that'll give you a huge difference. Check out my high kill strats video. I think I'll link that one at the end of this video if you are interested. If you need any convincing, square is the way to go. I have it rotate with me, and I don't believe there's anything else in here that's super useful. I do have FPS counter, server latency, packet loss, and then also GPU and CPU time. So basically, if you look up in the top left-hand corner, what that'll give me is my FPS. It'll give me my latency, so my ping, and then GPU, CPU time, whichever one is higher. That's the amount of time it's taking it to render a frame and provide it to you. So if you start getting frame loss in-game, you can look at those two, and whichever one is higher, that's what your system is waiting on to produce that frame. And so you can look at your CPU, you can look at your GPU, be like, okay, I'm getting bottlenecked by my CPU, GPU. Packet loss, because obviously that'll tell you your server performance. Now I'm going to be going through a lot of this quick, so you may have to pause and go through it, but I don't want to waste too much time. If something's not important to you, you just want me to get to it, I'm going to go through it. I'm also going to go through my Nvidia control panel settings, so keep around for that. I'm going to do that at the very end. Display mode, full screen. There's no reason you should be doing anything but full screen. If you have to alt-tab a lot, maybe go full screen borderless, but no. I use the Acer Predator. I'm going to do a video soon about all the gear that I use. I got a 2080 Ti, but actually this game is more CPU bound than GPU bound. But even though I have a 1440p monitor, I game at 1080p because frames are my priority. I display it at 1080p, have a full 100 render resolution. If you're struggling to get your desired frame rate, you can bump this down, but it's really going to make the game look a little sketchy. Disable VSync, absolutely. Custom frame rate limit, I set to +20 or +30 of what your monitor frame rate is. So if your monitor frame rate, like mine, is 144, I set it to 170. I don't like to have it completely, limitless, because then your GPU is working harder than it needs to display frames and generate frames that aren't even being displayed on your end. So I like to cap it for both power consumption and also thermal, more important. The menu frame rate I have limited, so it's not working too hard in the menus. NVIDIA highlights delete. If you have any question about, trying to capture a good highlight, just use the regular GeForce Experience Shadow Play, where you can, I believe it's press Alt and then Z, you can look it up specific for your computer, and that'll capture the last 20 minutes of your gameplay. Don't waste your time with renders because you got some random double kill and all of a sudden it just starts recording and affecting your performance in-game. Display gamma stays the same. Texture resolution is high. This is one of the only graphic settings that I have as high because it actually affects the way the game looks a lot. And as a content creator, I need to have it. Don't go to low. I would never suggest going to low or very low unless you need to, but I keep mine at high. Texture filter, it's just a beauty thing. I just keep it at low. Particle quality low. Bullet impacts I have enabled because sometimes I can tell where bullet impacts have hit me from. I can tell where that person is shooting me if I, maybe didn't hear the shot correctly or there's a lot of commotion. Tessellation I have disabled. Shadow spot or shadow map resolution I have low. I would never turn shadows off because a lot of times people can be on the high ground and seeing their shadow will help you know where they're coming from. So at the very least, keep it low. If there was an option to turn it off, I would not. Disable caching your shadows, particle quality low. DirectX ray tracing will tank, absolutely tank your FPS. Maybe if you're feeling cinematic, but not worth it competitive. Same thing with ambient occlusion and SSR. Anti-Aliasing I have set to T2X. Depth of field disabled. This is just going to make everything look blurrier, which you don't need. You want everything to be really crisp so you can spot movements, spot little jagged edges that might be an enemy hiding in a bush. Filmic strength I have set to 0. Important note though, if you are not using SMA 2 times or filmic SMA 2 times, you should set it to 100 to avoid visual noise. It kind of seems backwards, and I didn't realize that until really going through these settings. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about it, but let's say you're running off, make sure to set it up. Otherwise, you may have caught a couple streams where people have this really grainy, blurry. This doesn't look good. Motion blurs turned off on both. I want my picture to be clear. And then film grain turned all the way down because I don't want any unnecessary noise. Next up, we have audio settings. A lot of people ask what the best audio setting is to hear footsteps. From the countless testing that I've done and what I've seen all across YouTube, the two things that I see most often are boost and boost low. The reason for that is the footstep audio in the game has a low thudding sound. So boosting low will help bring out the thud of the footsteps. Unfortunately, that also means when you're opening up, weapons crates and it does a dun-dun, dun-dun, or you've got any explosions going on, sometimes footsteps can get masked, so keep an eye out. In moments of chaos, you still can get snuck up on this game. Master volume I have low. That's just because of the way I have my audio set up. But personally, you need to turn your music volume all the way down. There's this, really intense cinematic whenever you're in the final circle and everything's closing in. Delete that. You don't want to have, any chance for your footstep audio to get masked or to hear someone rustling through a bush. Turn your music volume all the way down. Play some Spotify. It's just not worth it. I wish they had a separate option for menu sound and in-game sound, but since they don't, and they have music in the final circle, throw it to 0. All right, so moving on to my controller settings, what I use is bumper ping. A lot of people have suggested trying bumper jumper or switching to tactical, but me personally, I've played with the same jump crouch buttons my entire childhood, so I'm not willing to change it up. What I actually did for the longest time, I played with claw, and then I eventually switched over to scuff. I'm actually gonna do a claw versus scuff hand cam video showing you guys how I hold my controller. Right now, I am using the Scuff Modern Warfare 2 Vantage controller, which basically allows me to use the paddles on the back to use my jump, slide, crouch, etc. I've got reviews on those if you're interested. I've done entire reviews on the Scuff Vantage 2 and the Impact or the Prestige. I love them both, and I personally would suggest using it. Code Isaac in the Scuff store if you want to check it out, but I'm not one who's willing to change out my settings because I've played with controller my entire life and I'm not trying to rewire my brain. But without further ado, I'll have an entire video dedicated to that in the future. I don't invert. Dead zone set to 0 unless you have stick drift, which is basically where the controller will move on its own without your commands. Keep that to 0. Horizontal stick sensitivity, I use 6.6 with a ADS multiplier of 0.85. That gives me enough, snappy movement that I can look around pretty quick while I'm running. But then when I ADS, I've got a little bit more control as to where I'm aiming. Response curve type is linear because it's the most consistent. Controller vibration disabled because you do not need it. It only messes with your aim. Aim assist is standard. Scale aim assist with FOV, I do because it makes my FOV a little bit stronger. All this stuff is pretty standard and it's a lot of its preference. What I would use is contextual tap and slide behavior tap. That's going to allow you to get your slide cancels going quicker, and we're going to talk about slide cancels in a movement guide. And then also do not use any sort of auto sprint. Sprinting is extremely loud, and it's also, if you get stuck in a sprint and you have to bring your gun down, it's going to affect your aim down sight time. And then finally, parachute auto deploy I have set to disabled because I want to get to the ground the quickest, and I trust my reaction time to manually deploy it. Just don't forget that you have it enabled or you're gonna splat. Keyboard and mouse settings. What I have is I have an 800 DPI on my Final Mouse Ultralight 2 Cape Town, and then I have a 4.1 in-game setting. Everything else is standard. I don't modify any of it. Aim down sight is relative. Once again, that's all standard for what the default settings are. Invert, I do not use. No mouse acceleration, no mouse filtering, no mouse smoothing. Just keep it all stock. All my movement settings are the same, except I have changed to left control for crouch, because that's what I'm most used to, and then prone is C. One thing that I have changed is the switch weapon minimum delay, and then also the weapon mount exit delay. I've changed both of those to 0. So basically that allows me to, mash any button I want and it'll switch the weapon instantly. If you have a delay, it will take a moment of time before it allows you to switch your weapon again. And then same goes for weapon mount exit delay. I have it enabled basically to where if I press any of my WASD, it'll allow me to step off of a weapon mount. So if I have my weapon mounted, all I have to do is press a movement key and it'll dismount me. But there's a delay by default of 100 milliseconds, which will keep you on that wall a lot longer than you want to be there. So set that to 0 if you are using that. Another change that I have made is I set my lethal grenade. I set it to center mouse wheel click. I use this because I want to be able to use WASD, have full movement, and so I'll cook a grenade, and then I can aim it with my mouse and throw it with the center mouse click. I've used that since, I believe, Apex, and it's just allowed me a lot more flexibility. One of the small changes that I make is I change this to apply all rather than apply one, so you don't have to sit there and mash 4 to put your plates in. Press 4 once and it'll automatically put those plates in. The way you can cancel it is either do a weapon swap, so swap, or you can just start pressing ADS or shoot and it'll cancel that animation. Overlays and shortcuts, this is one of the most important ones that I have on my list right here. The mute sound shortcut. If you're ever sitting in a plane and it's just going extremely loud, or you're in that pregame lobby where everyone's falling and shooting at each other, just press that button. You'll see up there it says mute sound enabled. Toggle it again, it'll go away. It takes away all that annoying sound. Ironically, if you can hear that, that's a jet going off in the background. Thanks, Nellis. Make sure to have that enabled so you can shut off the annoying sound of the C-130 as you're going in, or shut off the sound of the excessive gunfire. Everything else should be standard. So what a lot of people don't realize is you can go in and actually further tweak your graphic settings. You can actually override a lot of what the game does for you. And what I do is I go in, I go right-click, NVIDIA control panel. This is only if you have an NVIDIA graphics card. Image settings with preview. Use advanced 3D image settings. So it's not going to use the application. It's not going to use your preferred. It's just going to set exactly what you want. And here's what I have. I'm going to run through it really quick. Do not mess with your sharpening. If you mess with it, it's going to completely botch your game. It's going to make it look completely off. I don't know why, but it does not cooperate well with this game. Ambient occlusion is off. Filtering is application controlled. Anti-aliasing FXAA off. Gamma correction off. Anti-aliasing application controlled. And then we'll get down to the more important stuff here in a second. Anti-aliasing off. CUDA cores all. DSR off. Can't mess with those two. Low latency, I have that turned on. So basically allowing as little latency as possible. Max frame rate, I have that off because I have my frame rate capped at 170 in game. Monitor technology, I do have a G-Sync monitor. I have multi-frame samples off. I'm using my 2080 Ti. I prefer maximum performance. Most of the times this is set to, I believe, optimal to, help the environment and help your power bill, but I'm trying to get frames, so I have it set to max performance. Preferred cache rate, highest available. Shader cache on. Texture filtering, anisotropic filtering, is on. Texture filtering, negative LOD, allow. Texture filtering quality, I have it set to quality. You can set it to performance if you're really trying to max out the frames, but since I'm a content creator and I want my game to look well, I have it set to quality. Trilinear optimization is on. Threaded optimization, definitely auto, which will make it turn to on. Triple buffering off. VSync is off in game. You can set it off here as well if you want. Pre-rendered frames 1, virtual reality off. I don't do anything to change my sound. Resolution, please make sure if you're using a 144 hertz monitor, you set it to 144 here. So many people buy a great new monitor and then they don't adjust it and they're stuck at 60. Make sure you're going in here and you're getting the frame rate you need. I have it to 25, 60, 1440 outside of game. In game, it'll revert to 1920 by 1080 at 144 hertz. Color settings, I have my digital vibrance turned up about 10%. You can up it more if you want, and it's really going to make the game really pop. It's not going to be great for desktop, but it does help, you know, kind of bring out the shadows, makes the game feel a little more vibrant, and people tend to like my videos that way a little bit more as well. No need to worry about any of that. Make sure your VSync is enabled if you have a G-Sync monitor. And then adjust video color settings. This is one thing that's actually really important. Go into here, go into use Nvidia settings, and then all this stays the same for me, but make sure it's set to limited. Full allows you a broader depth of color. And basically what that means is in the lights, you'll be able to bring out a little bit more dynamic range in the lights. And then same, and most importantly for Warzone, the darks. And so in the shadows, it won't be completely blacked out. You'll actually be able to see a little bit more depth of color in your shadows. So make sure you have your dynamic range set to full. But all right, guys, that wraps it up. That's everything that I've got. I'm going to be doing advanced guides for both specific to keyboard and mouse and specific to controller in the future, but this should just be the fast and dirty. Set your settings to this. If you want more information on them, there are some really in-depth guides on it, but I'm not going to go through the details. I want you to know I've done my research. This is what I have set. I have it all set for a reason. Trust me on this. And I really hope this improves your game, helps you make some little changes to improve your game. And I will be streaming tonight. If you're catching this video, I will be streaming live, so make sure to follow me over on Twitch. I appreciate everyone's support. Look out for new details coming with new thumbnails and how we're going to be changing all that up as opposed to Warzone Academy versus Warzone gameplay. And I will see you all on the next one. Peace.